Hello. I have a novel today. This is something I was browsing at my local library. I didn't know what to read. It was like I've been reading too much of this nonfiction stuff. It's going to make me whack. And on the they have a shelf there for staff picked books of the library staff. So this one is called Death Valley by Melissa Broder. And I thought, well, I'll give that a chance. It's not very long, it's a staff pick at the library. These are intelligent reader type people, aren't they, who work at the library? So I picked it up and read it, and it actually is pretty good. I liked it. It is a story about a young woman. Well, she's like 41, and I don't think she ever had a name in this. I don't remember what her name was, if she had one. She has a husband who is kind of has some sort of ongoing chronic physical condition where he's drained physically all the time. He's in a wheelchair part of the time. He can kind of walk, but apparently he's really low on energy, and so he needs to be pushed around the wheelchair sometimes, I guess when they go to Walmart or whatever. And so, she has these sort of relational challenges with men, actually, because her father has been in an accident, and her father is in the hospital, and he's going back and forth. He's like, with whatever they're called, the machines that keep you going when life-sustaining, machinery that they have, the hospital stuff. So he's in the hospital, and he's has like 3 or 4 times gone to like turning blue stage, where he's going to die like in the day, and he doesn't really, and he keeps living. And so this ongoing thing with her father and also her husband. So she's got these 2 men in her life who are in kind of bad shape and ill all the time. So she decides to, I think one of them is in LA and one of them is in New York. And instead of being in either place, she takes off to the desert and stays at a Best Western and a Best Western motel. So there's a lot of stuff about the Best Westerns. This character likes the Best Westerns. So she goes to Best Western and stays there, and in Death Valley in the desert. And so she goes on these hikes that are recommended by the staff there, the people at the desk at the Best Western, and she goes up on these hikes. And on one of her hikes, she comes upon this giant cactus. And actually, it's kind of cactus that is not really around that area. It's more down in Mexico and Arizona, and she's in California in, like Death Valley area. Well, it's called Death Valley, so presumably somewhere around Death Valley there. So she runs into this cactus and sort of has this, and it's very big. It's really giant. It kind of has the arms, those kind of cactuses when you see out in the West. So she has quite a relationship with this cactus. She's noticed that it has a hole in it, or a gap, and she starts sticking her hand or her finger into the hole, and it's kind of wet in there, and somehow the hole gets bigger, and the cactus is so large that she's able to climb in through this hole in this gap into the interior of the cactus where she has these visions. So it is fiction, and about fiction here, a fiction can do anything at once. It doesn't have to be realistic. This is not historical fiction. This is made-up fiction, and it's not based on a true story or anything. So it can be whatever it is. And so this story actually has quite kind of hallucinatory aspects to it. So, which didn't bother me at all. It was kind of interesting. So it culminates in a very long section where she ends up getting lost in the desert for a couple of days or something, and so she's on the valley of death herself, as her father is, and as her husband is, sorta. So she's certain aspects of her life are passing before her face. While she's continuing to try to survive, she's not really well put together there, planning wise. She has a certain amount of water that ends up getting lost. There's a trail that goes this way, and a trail that goes that way, and she goes that way, and then comes back, and then can't figure out how she got which trail to take back. And the desert, I don't do the desert really well. I spent some time 2 years ago in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, which is in the high desert. It's way up in the mountains, and the high desert of Mexico, and walking around out of town in the desert is something I don't, I didn't really, I like trees. I'm not really into the sun that much. So the desert doesn't really work for me, but I like reading people's stories in the desert, trying to survive in the desert, like McTeague, Frank Norris's novel McTeague, which was made into the famous movie by Eric von Stroheim called Greed, where there's a big desert scene at the end, in Death Valley actually, and they really went to Death Valley and recorded it, and of course everybody dies. That spoiler alert on McTeague and Greed. But so yeah, the desert, and there's another desert story with Robert Ryan, which I saw in 3D. I don't know what the name of that movie is. Maybe I'll think of it in the editing process. So yeah, she has survival issues up there in the desert, and I didn't know whether she was going to live or die, and I won't tell you whether she lives or dies. You can read it for yourself if you want. But it is written in first person, so if it's in first person, well, you can still die if it's in first person, because, as I said, it's a novel and you can do anything you want, which is, something to remember. If you want to become a writer, you can do anything you fucking want, So when you're writing fiction, or nonfiction for that matter, I guess. So yeah, it was a lot about death, and looking at life, and contemplation of relationships here, and loyalty to people in relationships, sticking with people, all these things where she's clearly at the beginning in a state where she's kind of a little stressed out by the whole thing of her husband's injury, or her husband's chronic condition, and her father, who's in the hospital. He's going to die this week. No, now he's coming back. No, he's going to die. No, he's coming. This whole play of difficulty and illness in her life. So I like the novel. As I said, it's quite hallucinatory. Like, as I said, she goes inside this cactus, this giant cactus, which isn't supposed to be there anyway in this area, and she has visions inside the cactus. And there's a certain psychedelic essence to the novel. The character is sober, but she talks about psychedelics and mushrooms are mentioned a few times in the text, actually really before the all the psychedelic, all the visionary sort of stuff kicks in. So yeah, Death Valley by Melissa Broder. I like the book. You might like it. If you want, maybe it's a staff pick at your place. Is it a staff pick for me? It was, yeah, it was okay. You know, it was pretty good. And as I said, it was brief. Yeah, I like this book. I enjoyed this reading this novel. So, oh, speaking of San Miguel de Allende, which I just mentioned, I just watched last night here on YouTube a documentary called The Trip about Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters. It was made in 1999 for BBC Channel 4 television, and it was made right before, apparently in 1999, a new version of the bus was brought to England, and they toured England in this bus because an eclipse is going to happen there. But anyway, the point of that is that Neal Cassady, I knew Neal Cassady died in Mexico somewhere, but in fact it was San Miguel de Allende, as he left a party and was, you know, Neal Cassady was this big drug taker and speed freak, and he took some barbiturates at the party and then decided to walk to the next town. I don't know where he was walking to from there, but he started to walk, you know, late at night on some railroad tracks and was found dead on those railroad tracks at age 41 in whatever it was, 1965 or something like that. I think it was 1965. So anyway, just an aside, personal story about San Miguel de Allende, which has ended up where Neal Cassady died. I might have gone there to die myself, but turns out I didn't. My brother died instead, so I came back to New York. So that's about it for Melissa Broder and Death Valley. Nice little illustration on the front with the cactus, and it looks like the cactus is practically a tear. So that's that, and we'll talk to you next time. Speaking of Ken Kesey, watching this stuff about Ken Kesey, I thought, you know, I never read Sometimes a Great Notion, and I looked the second novel by Ken Kesey, and you know, it's a big one. It's like 600 pages, and I looked at good reads about it, and you know, a lot of he's got quite highly rated, and I think that I'm probably going to maybe read Sometimes a Great Notion sometimes soon, if I don't. Sometimes it take a great notion to jump in the river and drown. If I don't jump in the Hudson and drown before that, I'll probably read Sometimes a Great Notion. So like and subscribe. I'll talk to you later if you bother to tune in. Thanks.